VAT on all kinds of different ways all around the world. It's not a one fit on VAT. There's a lot of things you can do with it.
That means more regulations. And Toby, this tends to really hit poor people more. That there's a higher ratio.
Sure, I mean, your lower income, this tax is actually reversed because it actually hurts the poor people. But remember, we just saw gasoline in the United States go up to $4.55, and it killed the economy. Well, this is actually more than that because you're taking, almost $9–10 trillion of consumer spending. You're adding 15 or 20% tax on top of that. Do the math. That's about $1.5 to $2 trillion that comes out. And where does it go? If it went to pay down the debt, heaven forbid, maybe that'd be okay. But of course, that money doesn't keep recycling. What it's going to do is to go to support more spending. And we already are broke on Medicare and everything else. So this is a recipe for disaster.
Okay, hold on, Mike. I want to get Gary B. in because you did mention VAT taxes around the world. And in fact, history shows us, though, Gary B., that they haven't been all that successful.
Well, exactly. I'm glad. I was waiting. I wanted to see how Mike would spin that the value-added tax was a good thing. And he did a remarkable job. Unfortunately, he pointed to Europe. He said, hey, they have it in Europe, I guess implying that, hey, if they have it in Europe, it's okay over there. Well, you know what? The average tax burden in Europe, which does have this, essentially, this, across the EU, in fact, it's mandatory, this value-added tax or national sales tax, if you will, is about 40%. The average, the government spending over there, because of this revenue they take in, is about 47% of GDP. Here's the problem with all that. Study after study after study has shown, from the Federal Reserve, by the way, to the National Bureau of Economics across the board, have shown that higher taxes, higher government spending, the bigger the government is, leads to lower economic growth and lower job creation. So, Mike, if your intent is for us to turn into Europe, value-added tax is the way to go.
Well, is this hello to France?
Bonjour,
only without the good food.
How about this? You guys aren't happy with Europe. Let's look at Japan. Japan has the smallest tax burden in the world.
It has no personal income tax,
wait a second. Well, that's right. Here's what they do. It's all VAT tax, and then they do the unthinkable, Brenda. They actually make corporate America pay their fair share.
I'm happy with just the VAT tax.
Japan hasn't grown their economy in 24 years.
Well,
how would you make that an example?
You know what? They're not faced with a deficit that is so serious that it's a national security threat.
There is another
There's another. You have to raise money and cut. You can't just do one and solve the deficit problem. You guys know that.
There you go.
Tell Brenda to get her hand out of my picture. What's going on?
Oh, I'm so sorry, man. I won't take up any of your time either, but I do have to let Pat get in because, Pat, consumption isn't the only thing taxed in our nation, obviously. What would this mean?
Well, I guess there's 2 points I'd make. One is that, we tend actually right now tax consumption less and investment more than most other developed economies. And, you certainly could shift that balance without increasing the tax burden in total. The other point I would make is that the person who made this comment, the top money man you referred to, was Volcker, who's not exactly a left-wing nut job. And he made it in the context of, if we don't cut entitlements, this is something we may need to look at. Now, cutting entitlements, when you do that, you don't need to talk about a VAT. But Pat, goodness me, not many folks are talking about that.
But Pat, the CBO said they're scoring it. They're looking at it. So it's going further than just an offhanded Volcker comment. Now, all of a sudden, Congress is saying, hey, what about a value-added tax or a national sales tax?
We're going to need something because...
But unfortunately, no one on either side of the aisle is talking about the simple fixes of Social Security that would basically negate the need for this entire discussion.
Well, that's not going to happen. That is just not going to happen. Let me ask you, Toby.
Well, perhaps it should.
Well, yes, lots of things should happen in Washington that we don't see, unfortunately. But, Toby, consumers drive this economy, what are 70%? Sure. And by placing a tax on consumption, are you basically changing our way of capitalism?
Well, without getting complicated, the way it's being proposed is that all these fees are stuck all the way through the value chain. The consumer ultimately pays it, number one. Number two, the argument has been that, well, the people who are in the dark economy, in other words, the black market, they're actually not paying tax at all. This is a way to get them out. But what they found in Italy and other parts of Europe is when you have the VAT, you got a whole new crime wave in organized crime because they subvert the whole thing, and there's multiple billions of dollars every year in Europe that are stolen.
Oh,
so for the mafia, it would be a great idea. Go to Sicily.
You know, it's always a boogeyman on anything you want to talk about.
Wait a minute, that's your line, Mike.
Wait a second. This isn't a new idea, Tobin. The truth is, it works around the world. Now, wouldn't you rather have a VAT tax and do away with income tax? Huh?
But that's a problem, Mike.
We will never have that.
And this is how it's being sold to people. This is how it's being sold. Yeah, in lieu of higher income taxes. But that never happens, Tony. You still get the high income tax, and this is just a consumer tax on top.
Eric, that's true, but you have to start somewhere. You have to at least introduce a new idea. God forbid we should think.
Yeah, cut spending is a new idea.
I mean, that scares people. But it works around the world. It does lower tax burden.
How does it work around the world
exactly?
We have to do that. We have to do that in the United States.
Gary, where does it work around the world? I'm looking at Germany.
Japan.
I'm looking at England. I'm looking at the high
France,
inflation.
Spain. Look.
Yeah.
Exactly. Brenda, across the board, all those places have lower productivity, lower GDP growth. Look, you know, if works is we become like Europe, which is basically an entire welfare state, yeah, then it works. But I'm not sure that even Mike wants our way of living to become like Europe.
All of those countries have less wealth. The people have much less income. They have, you know, in France, 55% of the entire economy is from the, you know, government spending and a government dole. That is the recipe for killing our economy.
Everybody on this panel is educated enough to know this, and you can't deny this. We have to solve the deficit problem. Republicans
I totally
agree.
To us How about cutting spending now?
Well, wait a second.
You know what?
Well, you can cut spending. But Gary, you know as well as I do. You got to have an income side.
Let's end on that one little agreement, okay? How we get there, I think we probably disagree. Oh, I'm sorry. I want to get my hand out of your box here on the Brady Bunch. All right.